Hello, everyone. Everyone from the reality team community, everyone from the Talk on Main Street community. Welcome to our late Thursday afternoon weekly conversation that we call Real Facts, Real Simple. Today we have three of us, myself, Deb Lavoie, Annabel, who anyone who's part of Talk on Main Street will know, and Gus Andrews is with us today. And Gus is going to be a pretty interesting person to talk to. She just published a book called Keep Calm and Log On. She has a background as a hacker, a scholar, an educator, and she has a way of blending technology, media literacy with a real sense of sort of humanity and compassion to help us figure out how to stay informed, connected with the people we care about, but just less freaked out online overall. So hi, Gus. Hi, Annabelle.
Hello. Good to meet you.
Hi there.
So Gus, when we spoke the other day, we got into a lot of really interesting conversations about a lot of different things. But one of the place that we sort of started, and the place where I think I'd like to hear you talk a little bit is, you know, this election season is incredibly stressful, right? We've got this pandemic that is, you know, isolating a lot of us and scaring some of us, frankly. We've got the election, which has all of this divisive stuff going on. There's all this disinformation. A lot of it is making us feel very emotional, angry, combative, worried, stressed. Where do we start to think about all of this and how technology is affecting us emotionally?
Sure. So I generally find that you want to start with your own emotions, and you want to start in the sort of simplest place you possibly can, right? You want to start with some really basic techniques you can use just to sort of make there be less of the scary in your life. And so that might be, that might involve, for starters, just making some really simple decisions. Actually, sorry, before anything else, you want to make sure that you check in with yourself and see what your emotions are, right? So, you know, from a mindfulness perspective, what you want to do is sort of just check in with your body. How are you feeling? You know, are there certain parts of your body that are tense? Are you breathing quickly? Is your heart rate elevated, right? Are your shoulders up around your ears? That's my common one. My shoulders are usually up here. And I go to dance class, my teachers are like, shoulders down, right? So they're just check in with yourself that way. One of the things they talk about in mindfulness a lot is giving something a name. So if you can say, I'm frustrated, or I am frightened, you know, and actually saying that out loud, that actually supposedly has a different impact on, you know, the way your brain handles things. And then you're able to move forward from that point there. So once you have started to identify those things about your emotions, then you want to sort of look at the media to some extent that are coming into your life that may be helping cause those. I mean, and obviously we have a lot of personal factors in our lives as well right now, you know, whether it's your kids having to do school at home while you're trying to work, or whether you're actually worried about somebody in your family getting sick. There's a whole lot of stressors, but some of them just come in specifically through media. When I say media, I don't just mean digital media, and I don't just mean traditional media like radio, TV. I usually sort of think of those all in the same breath, basically. Like, I'm agnostic. Those all basically bring us in the same things right now. So I sort of think about them all at the same time. So, but say you're thinking about, something you're seeing on the news, right? Take a look at the techniques that are being used. Stop for a second and sort of go, whoa, what's going on here? There's a great rubric that somebody uses that goes, whoa, wait, what? So you go, whoa, what did I just hear? And then wait, what is this piece of media doing? And then what are they trying to convince me to do, right? So, if you are watching CNN or Fox, right? I don't really care which 24/7 news outlet you are watching. My general recommendation is avoid them entirely, the 24/7 news outlets, because there are certain things that happen on 24/7 news that don't happen in pretty much any other channel, in that they're constantly trying to keep your attention. So they may be using menacing sounding music. They may be flashing images quickly or doing quick cuts to keep your attention, like in the video. They may be using words in the scroll at the bottom that are frightening, or they may just be saying up next, in 5 minutes, we'll talk about this and that. And the reason they do this is they have to sell ads, right? The channels have to survive. And so what they have to do is keep people's attention there. They can keep selling advertising if they can keep people's attention on the channel. So, and the way that they do that on 24/7 news is to continually make things sound more frightening than they are, and to continually give you little tiny pieces of a story, even if they're rumors. They're just sort of coming nonstop. So it's important to keep track of what is happening that way. Like, are they actually, is that something that the media outlet you're looking at is doing to you? And you can do the same thing on social media too, right? Look at the words that are being used to describe something, something being described as disgusting, or is it being described as awful or horrifying or something like that? Those words are there also to, get you frightened as well, or to keep you hanging on. Everybody knows about this one weird trick will, help you do such and so on, help you lose belly fat or get your political party elected into office. And that's the way they keep you there. Like, that's the way they make you want to click through. So pay attention to those techniques, because those techniques are techniques that are likely to be making things worse for you right now. And I would recommend cutting them out of your life. So there are really simple steps you can take. I actually have taken to muting most people on my social media feeds. And so you might be going, how are you still following anybody you care about? I've muted my mom. I'm sorry, Mom. I've muted, plenty of people of really good friends, because what I want to do is not get everything from them when the social media feed wants me to have it, when Facebook wants me to have it, or Twitter wants me to have it. I want to go to their pages when I want to see what's going on with them. So by muting more and more people, that's one technique, is just by muting a lot of people in your feed and then going to that page when you want it.
So if I have that right, I think that's a really interesting technique, which is, instead of allowing everyone to sort of converge in one big feed, you say, wait, you mute them from your feed, but you go visit their pages like you would go visit them sort of in real life, or maybe that analogy is a little too strong, but.
No, I think that's a pretty good one, actually, because, they're not always in your kitchen. Like, you go and see them sometimes, and that helps. And then, you also don't get, the benefit there is, we know for sure there's been evidence that Facebook at one point did an emotion contagion experiment where they took one batch of people and showed them only happy posts, and one batch of people and showed them only scary, sad posts. And they found that the continued moods of people in each of those groups continued in that direction. So the happy seeing people saw more happy things and posted more happy things, and the people seeing depressing, sad things continued in that direction. They can do that. I'm not saying that they always do. As a matter of fact, there was a big pushback on that, but they're, once again, the feed wants you to stay there and continue advertising to you. They're not doing this for your benefit. That's not social. If you want social, my other suggestion actually is just spending more time in, say, Facebook chat groups, or getting off Facebook, say, and I'm sure plenty of people here aren't on Facebook, but going to, just group chat. I use Signal a lot. It's both secure, and I can have group chats there. WhatsApp also is pretty secure, and you can have group chats there. So that's a way of just sort of like getting the algorithm out of your life, like going and actually having social time in social spaces rather than algorithms or driven spaces.
So by doing this, you're actually making social media help you feel more connected, and you are a little less bombarded by the emotions they're pushing at you, versus actually visiting with your friends and people you want to talk to, right?
Sure, yeah.
Can I ask a question? I mean, I guess the word I'm thinking about is addiction. That there is a chemical addiction going on here.
Yep.
And I think many of us, I can admit that I have some form of addiction, and then I find myself justifying it. Like, I'm online all the time because I'm trying to, like, win the election, or save the climate, or whatever. But at some level, there is just pure chemical addiction going on. And so I'm just wondering, you know, how do we know when we're at a dangerous level? What are
How do we know when we're at a
some
dangerous level? Yeah.
symptoms? Like what are like if you're an alcoholic, you know, there are just certain warning signs, right? Like
Yeah.
you drink when you're alone, you consume lots of alcohol, whatever. You know, there are
Yeah.
some lists of things that you should look
Sure.
out for. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I actually hadn't thought too much about like what the symptoms are. Aside from
Mhm.
the theme of Black Mirror, which is that if technology is a drug, what are its side effects, right?
Yeah.
So there are certain things that I think we can probably all identify. Like if you're up in the middle of the night and you have to be up doing something in the morning, and I had this at one point. I basically got myself off Twitter when I realized I was up at midnight going through and reporting accounts that were clearly bots and were spreading political disinformation or Nazi propaganda. And then I was like, I'm doing Twitter's work. I'm doing work for Twitter that Twitter really ought to be doing themselves, which they really weren't doing at the time, and they're still not doing a great job of. But the whole being up in the middle of the night when you've got something else to do, or generally when you have something else to do, if you are supposed to be present, say you're at a family event like a wedding, or if you're trying to spend time with your kids, for example, you really want to be there, and you need to give it your full attention. So those are things to watch out for, certainly, to sort of go, am I spending too much time? Once again, just check out your general physical, being. Like, are you feeling tense? I noticed yesterday, while I've moved myself to chat, like most of my social online time now, I spend in a Slack chat channel where eventually I come to the bottom of the feed and it stops, and so it doesn't keep scrolling and going on forever. But I found a way, I just realized last night, where I'm continuing to poke through channels that aren't notifying me, being like, is there something new there? And so if you find yourself doing something over and over again, like that's definitely a moment to check in and go, okay, just first notice it. Don't be hard on yourself. Don't yell at yourself. I often think about, like, when I think about mindfulness, I think about my attention as a box of kittens, right? So if my attention is like crawling out of the box and going everywhere, if my attention is a kitten, I'm not going to scream at the kitten and yell it and at it and throw it into the box. I'm going to gently pick the kitten up and put it gently back in the box, right? So don't be hard on yourself. Don't say I'm a terrible person because I'm continuing to scroll through this stuff. Just say, I notice that I'm doing this again. This is a Buddhist meditation technique as well. It's like, I notice that I'm having these thoughts, right? So that's the thing to do there. And then frequently there are behaviors you can take, or there are steps you can take to make it easier to break what we call that addiction. The dopamine trigger is what Tristan Harris and various people who actually were hired by Google and Facebook and Twitter to continue to addict people that way, and it's known, like, the goal is to get people to stay on the website. The dopamine trigger is what triggers dopamine in your brain. Dopamine is a pleasurable hormone. It's the thing that makes you feel better. And we get it, like it's the thing that slot machines give off, for example. So it's like, you're not always going to get a prize every time from a slot machine, but it'll be variable. Like sometimes you might really pay out, or sometimes it'll give you a little bit, sometimes it'll give you nothing. And it's the same thing with your social media feed. Sometimes you get like a really, really cute and funny dog video, or sometimes you get something, just some boring random job update from your aunt, or sometimes you get Nazi propaganda. And it's that change in what you get from these things that is what keeps you coming back. If it was always a reward, you'd actually be more likely to walk away. So, doing what I suggested with your feed is one way to deal with it. Another one is just taking it out of your hands. Do the thing that people have said, where you put your phone in another room. If you can't do that, there are apps on your phone now that will help you manage your time, that can help you say, I only want to spend this much time on stuff. I've got some information on that on the Keep Calm Log On website, on how to set those up. So that's keepcalmlogon.com. So those are various ways to notice those symptoms in yourself, and then to take small steps to make it a little bit better. And we're talking harm reduction here. We're not talking quitting cold turkey. Quitting cold turkey when you're addicted is hard. Like, you want to take small steps.
So one of the things that I think is interesting is that your emotions are kind of being manipulated in a couple of different ways, right? Mm-hmm. Your emotions are being manipulated by the platform, right? In terms of what you see and that sort of experience of, doom scrolling or whatever it is that you're mesmerized by online. And of course, the platforms do want to maintain that mesmer. But a lot of stuff, especially right now, and of course, the issue that I'm obsessed with is how we can be less vulnerable to disinformation. And,
Right.
you know, we all know at this point that one of the things that makes disinformation so potent is because it is very manipulative. And the way you can tell a signal that you're being manipulated is that your emotions start to rise, whether that emotion is, aha, I knew it, or, oh, that's terrible, or, oh, that's outrageous. You know, I've talked to a couple different people. How do we start to recognize that as a flag and teach ourselves to pause when that sort of, I am having a strong emotional reaction flag goes up?
Right. So yeah, and I think one of the key one to look for is the fear response. And this comes up a couple places. It comes up in your social media, and then it also sometimes comes up in phishing scams in your email as well. Or even, you know, you see similar scams in WhatsApp, where what people are trying to get you to do is act on fear, right? So you're frightened that you are about to lose control of your credit card. You're frightened that your grandchild has been kidnapped. Or you're frightened that something is going to happen at a national scale, you know, and granted, there are some legitimately frightening things happening. Like we just found out that the, you know, governor of Michigan was targeted by people who actually wanted to kidnap her. So that is scary. But then that is sort of going to come at you as a news story, right? Like that is sort of, this is the thing that happened over here. Whereas the targeted attacks on you personally, whether they're in social media or email, are more, you know, you should be frightened right now and you should do something and act on it right now. So if you can look for that particular formulation of be afraid, act now, that's a key one to cut off, like to stop and say, okay, this is most likely somebody who is really trying to frighten me and get me to do something that I will regret in one way or another. And sometimes that will be things like, you know, in the next month, we're going to see it at voting places. We've seen this actually for the past 10 years, not just in the United States, but elsewhere. It was started, some pioneering, unfortunately pioneering efforts were made in Brazil and Mexico by politicians and some of their shady peers to go up on social media and say, this polling station is literally on fire, do not go there right now. So it's likely that we will see frightening things like that about our personal voting area come up. That's when you want to go and stop and get more information from a trusted news source rather than just a rumor.
Yeah, I think that can't be overstated.
Yeah.
That as we get farther and farther into this election season, we have to teach ourselves to be more skeptical of everything. And
yeah,
that building that habit is not easy. Here's the thing is that everyone gets taken in. I get taken in, and I spend all day learning about this stuff, and yet I still get taken in. And learning to take that pause takes a little effort. Do you have any, Annabelle? Do you had any sort of success in
yeah. I know where you're going with this.
Self-discipline.
I think it's a matter of self-awareness too. I think I know where you want to go with this. I know you want to talk a little bit about understanding your own background as well. But I think I just want to make a pitch for my 2020 campaign, which is just make 2020 boring. Just let's get real boring. Like go be a poll worker. That's boring.
I love this.
Be bored about what's happening with the election. Couldn't we just really use for something to be boring for a change rather than like super exciting all the time? Make 2020 boring. That's
I love this so much.
Making 2020 not make 2020 boring again because it's never been boring, but just make it boring. Stay home.
Wow.
You know, don't run around on the streets and scream. Anyway, so yeah, but I think the key thing when it comes, because we know from research that's been done in the digital security communities and the hacker communities where I hang out, that it's not just Russia, it's Iran, China, and all sorts of political actors, large and small, around the world, who are trying to divide people And they are working on both sides. So we saw that Russia was actually targeting not only viewers of Fox News and MAGA hat wearers, but it was also targeting people in Black Lives Matter. It was targeting, various, viewers of NBC, stuff like that as well. So they're going to work to spread us apart, right? So things that try to get us to agree with each other less and less. So one of the first things we have to do, and this comes from anti-propaganda education from the 1930s when Hitler was on the rise, is to understand our own beliefs and backgrounds first. Really get to know them and know why we have them. Not just because we think they're good or they're correct or whatever, but understand historically where they come from in each of our lives. So that was the insight of the Institute for Propaganda Analysis. Like I said, which was working in the 1930s. That was a collaboration with some folks at the Teachers College where I studied, and then also Edward Feiling of Feiling's Basement, interestingly enough, funded this. They looked at propaganda, and what they saw was it would try to target the way that people already felt good about themselves and the things that they already believed. So it might be going, might be trying to appeal to you as a good Christian, a good Muslim, a good Jewish person, or a good atheist, a good scientist, right? A good member of the political party that you're a member of, right wing or left wing. It could make a class appeal to you. It might say, well, workers should feel this way about something, or educated people should feel this way about something. So the trick is to find the thing that agrees with you first. Look at the message you just got and you just shared on social media, before you share it on social media. Say, does this agree with me? Why do I feel this way? And why do I feel inclined to share it? One of the key reasons why a lot of us want to share things is to demonstrate our membership in our community. So you could be going, well, I'm a well-educated person, so I'm going to share this particular piece of information about politics or about COVID or something like that. And if that thing is incendiary and is trying to frighten people and get them to act, even if it's correct, I would avoid sharing it right now, because it's all about making 2020 boring. Like I said, you have to understand your own motivations for doing it, and understand that somebody else might be trying to play on those motivations in order to get you to take actions that benefit them and not you and your community.
So in other words, the whole point of campaigns and disinformation is to manipulate you emotionally.
Yep.
And there's so much stuff going on. There's so many people who are competing for our attention, competing for our loyalty, competing to even with our sense of reason and real and not real. And I think what you're talking about, to me, kind of says you got to put a little bit of space between you and what you're reading, enough space to kind of say, okay, what is the motivation behind these people? And am I going to let them have that level of control over my response?
Right. Absolutely. And I think this can be, the things that they're putting out there that might end up being divisive or might end up spreading disinformation can be independent of what source they are too. So I was reading a critique yesterday that was really smart, and I wish we'd had back in 2016, where the writer was pointing out that a lot of the disinformation that's been spread by political parties, but specifically the Republican Party, has come out of actually mainstream media. They have continued to spread those things. So if Donald Trump says something about the coronavirus that is factually incorrect, if you don't say in the headline, Donald Trump said this thing that is factually incorrect, you are going to spread that information as if it's real. And because it's all just coming at us in our feed, it becomes really hard for all of us. We all get really overwhelmed because we have to continue to, we're going, well, I just heard that masks were useful, but that person just said that masks weren't useful. And how do I know what the truth is? Because it's being said just even in one headline, and the way it's stated, the words that are used in that headline, in a way that makes it confusing to us as to what's actually, based on science, based on evidence, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, you might
I
feel
wanna,
inclined to share something even from, say, from the New York Times or from some other, you know, outlet that you respect. Watch the wording, and make sure that it's not, you know, don't just spread it because it's like, oh, can you believe this person said that? That is the worst thing to share right now, because that is how they continue to get oxygen to survive when you don't want them, that idea to survive.
I have a friend who's been engaging with us on the live stream. Her name's Laura. Hi, Laura. She's in Iowa. And she's a healthcare professional. And I know Laura quite well, and she's very active online, as I am. And she's just commenting that this is hard. You know, this just is like, you know,
Yeah.
I think that I'm feeling that way too. I think I really like your suggestions, but I also know this feels really hard.
No, it really, I just started
Yeah.
crying out of nowhere yesterday. Like, we all have to acknowledge it's hard and that we're all having a really hard time with it. Yeah.
How can we help each other in that? Can we be media buddies or something?
Yeah, no, because I have this community of people who I really, really, I really trust to have my back on this kind of stuff, and where we really do support each other. Part of it is continuing to share good news, you know, share good news with each other, and set rules and guidelines. Like in the one community that I hang out in, we're like, we have certain channels where we talk about scary news things and certain channels where we don't, and just respect that and let people. There's no judgment if you don't spend any time on the scary news channels, or if you don't catch up on them for a couple of days, or you just don't do it in the evenings or whatever. You know, just support each other's decisions. Don't shame anybody for not being woke. You know, don't shame anybody for not keeping completely up on things.
I think that notion of shame is actually a really interesting one, because I think that we're ashamed of being addicted to our media. We are ashamed of the fact that we get confused by it. We are ashamed of the fact that we can't quite get a grip on ourselves enough not to share it. I feel like we kind of just sort of have to acknowledge that we are human and be okay with it. And then to, you know, encourage each other toward these healthier behaviors, right? So, you know, hey Gus, I see you're sharing a lot today. How are you feeling?
Yeah, sure. Right. Check in and yeah, check in on people's mental health. Check in and, you know, see how they're doing. That's really important. Yeah, thinking too, like part of taking the shame out of it is just like set up like simple physical roadblocks for yourself. So it's not about your impulse control, because like impulse control is hard, right? So like, you know, one of the best pieces of you know, breaking the addiction cycle advice I saw was drop your phone between your bed and the wall. Right? So that you just can't get to it. The other one is, you know, just take the app off your phone. I took the Twitter and Facebook apps off my phone. Log out of your account. Log out. I do that more often. This is actually a great security piece of security advice, as well as a piece of privacy or, you know, mental sanity advice. You know, set up a password manager and get your passwords in there. That makes that safer. Log out of your account so you're not always logged in your browser or your phone browser. That will make things safer. The other one there is if you have there's a thing called a YubiKey, or a two-factor authentication key that you plug into your USB drive. You can use that to make it so it's less likely for somebody to be able to hijack your account, because they need to have that physical thing there. Or you can also do the thing where you have something text your phone every time you log in to give it a special code. That all makes your account more secure and less likely to be hijacked, but it also keeps me from, sometimes I'm like, I can't find the key. I'm not logging on Twitter right now. And that helps. Like, you know, it's simple and small and stupid and annoying, but it does slow my roll, you know, and I recommend it.
Well, and I think, well, I don't know that you were trying to get to this, Deb, but I feel like the underlying issue for some of us is the feeling of loneliness and helplessness.
Yes.
Like, I feel like that's where I'm coming from sometimes. It's like I connect with people online because there's that kind of general sense of isolation and loneliness. And then I feel like I create a lot of content on Facebook because it makes me feel like I'm not helpless.
Oh, absolutely. You know? Yeah, Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I talk about in the book is how we really have to kind of separate out our publishing and our broadcasting behavior online from our social behavior, because the broadcasting stuff feels social, but it's kind of like junk food. It's like low nutritional value food. So you want to go for higher nutritional value social things. You know, so think about another reason to pay attention to your motivation for posting something is does it feel like it's helping? Are you doing it because it feels like it's helping, or it feels like you are establishing yourself as an expert, or you're building your audience? Just notice that that's separate stuff. Like I talk about it as the difference between singing on stage versus singing a lullaby. You're going to sing in different ways, right? You're going to sing much louder on stage, and if you're singing to a baby singing a lullaby, if you sing loud, you're going to wake the baby up, and the whole point is changed, right? So there's really different qualities to the social purposes for the different things that we do online, and the broadcasting stuff is another thing that just it's not as useful as it seems. And there's, you know, I'm not saying don't do it, because especially for those of us who have, you know, online careers and need to, you know, maintain an audience, just be aware that that's not the same thing as really getting like nurturing social contact. One of my favorite social things that I started doing at the beginning of the pandemic, and I've stopped, and I really need to start doing it again, is what we called at one of my jobs a panda cam, where I just sort of go to a bunch of friends like, hey, I'm going to have the camera on in my kitchen while I'm cooking, no pressure, whatever. And then we all just like put the camera on, and maybe we talk a little bit, like everybody's got a camera on, but it doesn't have the usual pressure that Zoom does, where it's like, you have to perform that you are being attentive, and you have to perform that you're interested and engaged and things like that. Instead, it's just like, I'm just cooking in my kitchen, I'm wearing my shabbiest clothes, you know, I just dropped something on the floor, you know, and your friends are doing the same thing. There's no pressure to even talk necessarily. It's just sort of like ambient social presence. Feels really good, and I recommend panda cams to more people for sure. And I've been doing like, yeah, it's one sort of like low grade way to just like sort of be there with people.
Okay. Okay, I like that. Okay, so I know this sounds strange, but this feeling of community that we do have online, right? I mean, do you think it's a mirage, or is it real? Because I do feel like, oh, I have this sense of intimacy with a lot of people I have never met. Some of them I have met, like Laura, I have met, stayed at her house. But you know, I have 5,000 Facebook friends just on my personal page. I don't know most of them, and I'm just wondering, like, is that? Sometimes I think, is it a sickness that I actually feel like I have like a real relationships with people?
So I would like to comment on that. You do have real relationships with people.
Yeah.
And those online relationships are real. Like, one of the things as we were, you know, getting organized here, I feel as though I know you, Annabelle, quite well, and that Gus and I are new friends, and I have never met either of you in real life. These are our real relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say, Annabelle,
it's not a mirage at all. Yeah.
Right. So the other thing, Annabelle, when you do a lot of different things. When you, and I see you go through this thought process in your head about how to make it a positive experience, that you try to take this, oh my God, I'm freaking out energy, and put into something that's constructive. And I feel like if we could all just sort of continually remind ourselves that energy is real, that anxiety is real, but you can actually you can make choices about what you do with that energy, as long as you remember to, right?
Yeah. No, it is almost like doing martial arts. Like, you're constantly trying to convert energy into something that's going to help, you know. And I guess I'm struggling to. I'm just trying to figure out, like, how do I make all this both manageable for me, and what are some very concrete ways I can really help other people, right? So I'm just trying to like take what you're saying
Yeah.
and extract the bits that I'm like, okay, that's doable. I can do that.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it doesn't help to go, is this whole thing a mirage? Is this whole thing an addiction? I think it's worth really paying attention to the quality and the nature of what we're doing within each of the things, because you can use Facebook for any number of things. You can use Zoom for any number of things. Actually, I think one of the biggest aha moments I had this summer is I went to a software usability conference where you know, they managed to actually like normally it's an in-person conference and has a very specific feel to it. And normally it's really hard to, when you have a conference, to get that sort of in-person feeling. And the great thing about a conference is like randomly running into people over lunch, right? Or randomly running into people, they call it hallway track at the conference. And two conferences actually, now that I think of it, this summer had interesting ways of handling that. One of them used breakout rooms in Zoom, where they just randomly threw like 4 or 5 people. They broke the whole population of the conference up into 4 or 5 groups of 4 or 5. And then you were supposed to just have a small discussion for a while. And then you came back to the main group and then maybe you continued that discussion on for a while. And that really did it, because you actually, you did the basic introduction with various people and talked with them for a while. And I've had breakout rooms in other groups too that have done the same thing. That really begins to make that connection where it wouldn't have necessarily, just because of the scale, right? So paying attention to the scale of the interactions you're having, I think is actually really, really key to acknowledging for yourself, is this a nourishing social relationship online, or is it something that is really taking more of my energy than it's giving back to me? So the size is one thing. The other conference that I went to had a back channel all the time where people were just like texting and things like that. And that could have, this is a conference where we actually had Nazis show up and harass people a couple of years ago. It was a hacker conference. And that was really stressful. And I thought it was going to happen again because it's so easy to find like random abusive people online. But they did a really good job early on of kicking out all the people who were trying to start trouble. And because they had a picture of what starting trouble looked like. And they're like, when this happens, that person is yoinked and they don't get to come back at all. Because, we have to have everybody be there, act in good faith. That's another basic ground rule if you're doing community management online, is like, set the rule. If you are here, you should be acting in good faith. And if we can prove that you're not acting in good faith, if you're trying to make fun of people or troll them or trying to start trouble, we will kick you out with no questions asked and you're not coming back. So, because of that, this chat channel actually managed to make a nice social environment out of a conference that had actually had problems before. So it's really about the quality of the relationship, I think, that you're having through all of these media, and that there might be, actual technological ways, like it might be like only, making it just 4 or 5 people or making a chat channel. Those are the technology things, but then, enforcing the social rules that go, we're going to make this a good social experience and a meaningful and worthwhile social experience where you can find a mentor or actually open up to somebody, and sometimes it's a matter of each of us individually deciding to go and talk to a couple people, and paying attention to the fact that we're, meaningfully seeking out a couple of people or only one person to talk to rather than a bunch, is how you, I think, maintain larger groups of people who you can have meaningful relationships with online. I know I'm rambling, I'm sorry, but yeah.
I actually think that that's a very good point and very interesting. Because of my career, I was on the platforms pretty heavily since around 2008. And back in 2008, it had a very small community feel. And there was a lot of rainbows and unicorns and everything was good. And there weren't a lot of bad guys. And that has definitely changed over time. And it's become more of a consumption rather than a participation thing.
Absolutely.
There's less dialogue. And so maybe that's actually one of the real keys, which is to make more conversation and to focus on a few people in a given time.
This is actually where one friend of mine and I started talking about 2003 House. So I don't know if you remember the PBS series, or maybe it was BBC also, where it'd be like colonial house, and everybody there would go and live with just the technology they had in colonial times, and they'd live in like colonial structures, or Victorian house.
I actually
So I was
really
like, I
liked
want
that show.
2003 house. Like, I want 2003 house where I just have my blog and what things were like on my blog, and I just want my cell phone, but I don't necessarily want it as full of crap as it did. You know, so I want my internet connection. I don't want to go back to colonial times. Like, I still want my internet connection. And that was actually sort of, that underlies a lot of what I did in Keep Calm and Log On, in terms of thinking through how to technologically make these changes. Because if you can turn off the feed, you get closer to 2008, right? Because at that point, like on Twitter, you got to the end of your, the tweets that you saw, and then it said load more, and it was up to you. And that is what they think of, what software designers think of as friction. And they say, we want that to go away. You know, we want you to stay on forever. And so now you go to the bottom of your Twitter feed, and it keeps going, and it keeps going, and it's the bottomless, endless soup bowl of, horrible garbage, right? So that's one of the reasons I'm sort of thinking about these things that you can do to, make technology harder for yourself, make technology boring again, right? So make it harder for yourself, because that actually is one of the, like, adding friction is the thing that actually will improve your experience. So.
Well, let me ask you something about quality of
Mm-hmm.
relationships again.
Mm-hmm.
And because reducing the number of people I interact with definitely would increase quality.
Mm-hmm.
But if I am trying to organize using online tools,
Right.
I want to have influence millions of people,
Uh-huh.
and then, but also to maintain some quality. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess that's my question right now is like, I mean, even Talk on Main Street, I try to do these conversations that are long form, so they're not 2-minute videos, but sometimes they're like even hour and a half long conversations. Like, that's my experiment with trying to improve quality.
Uh-huh.
Will people listen to these long conversations when they're used to listening for only like a minute, right? And so I'm trying different things, but the struggle is, how do I make them authentic? How do I make them real? How do I make them relevant? How do I really transcend kind of the limitations of the platform so that it really feels like we're connecting? Because that's what we do want. Mark Zuckerberg talks about connecting, but I want connections to actually happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think my question is, are the smaller conversations and the organizing always the same thing?
No, not always the same thing, but I guess for me, I feel like it's important to try to create online communities where there are authentic relationships.
And it sounds like
Yeah.
you're associating the authenticity with the smaller group interactions generally, right?
Well, like a good example, this conversation. It's like there are 3 of us talking, but it's on a platform that has thousands more people on it. And so I'm hoping that they will watch this at some point and benefit from this conversation. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, well, that's interesting too, because that changes the nature of this conversation, or maybe this conversation is always the case where it is sort of performative. I'm performing. I am author of book, and I have thought up these things, and I find them helpful, and I'm sharing them with you. And so that's very performative in a way. But also, like, I noticed that I just switched modes and I asked you a question, which I wasn't necessarily doing. And sometimes it's a matter of remembering to do that, right? Because would you say also that you think that when people are really asking questions, they are more, would you find that more authentic or not as authentic?
Yeah, I mean, I generally like more Socratic approach where people are going deeper and asking questions as opposed to just, doing talking points. But I mean, there's a certain mystery and science to social connections. Right?
Yeah, totally.
And so that's what I'm trying to understand. Yeah.
I mean, I think my absolute favorite theorist, and who's really accessible in talking about this too, is Sherry Turkle, of course, who I think has done a really good job over many, many years in thinking about, you know, online relationships and what the good and the bad are. And I think she's actually, I mean, if you read all of her work together, you know, that's where you do see that it's really like, it's not just all, you know, addictive and bad for you. And it's not just all meaningful and authentic. Like, it's different at different times. And I think, you know, changing up how you do each of these things, you know, and sometimes having small conversations, and then sometimes building those small conversations into large conversations can really help make it more authentic, I think. But I really do like your model. I mean, like, I know that generally I have really enjoyed, like, anything fireside chat shaped, I think is a really good format for, it does foster that intimacy, because it's not just somebody talking at you, it's definitely more back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, fireside chats. I like it. I like you have a fireplace behind you.
I
as
do,
well.
right there. We are having a fireside chat.
I like
Fireside
this.
chat.
Oh, Deb, maybe we should do that. Maybe we should call it fireside chats.
I like that idea a lot. I have a fireplace. I could sit in front of it.
Ooh.
Do you have a fireplace, Annabelle?
I do, actually.
Well, there it is. We're switching locations for next week.
This one's just borrowed. I'm house sitting right now, so it's not actually mine. It's fantastic, though. It's really a lovely fireplace.
Yeah.
But I think this idea that, you know, Annabelle, you struggle with this issue of how do you make a large audience an authentic and caring experience. And I think that is something that clearly is very meaningful to you, and you put a lot of energy into that. And I've seen you pursue and create and nurture that community in a lot of different ways. I think this notion that we slip into these performative roles, as Gus, as you were saying, when we're online, it is kind of a challenge, and to remind ourselves that it's actually when we're being authentic, when we're having real communication with people, when we're asking questions, when we're learning, that's when we're most interesting as well, I think.
And it's to remember to do both, and to remember to do both and not to confuse them and think of them at the same time. Annabelle, it really sounds like you do both in a way that is really effective, and it's a matter of sort of like sometimes going in and talking with a few people, and then stepping back out and bringing that back out to the larger group. I think that's actually, the more I think about it, the more I think that some of the best communities I've been in have given those opportunities. So even just having more opportunities, I think, even for random strangers to get to know each other a little bit more too, but then also for all of us to spend time with, you know, people who we kind of know and want to spend a little bit more time with, and then come back to the bigger group again, that, you know, micro to macro, going back and forth.
Yeah. I mean, you know, another thing, I mean, I don't want to take us off tangent, but you know that, what is this research where you ask 24 questions and you fall in love? I don't know if it's 24.
I don't know that one.
But the New York Times did a big story about this, that there's like research behind certain questions that elicit vulnerability and empathy. And so they put people in lab situations, total strangers would ask each other these questions, and then they would fall in love. I know it's kind of crazy, but there's something to these questions, because it elicits sharing and vulnerability and empathy. And I feel like if we can bring some of that into online interactions, where
we have to make space for it too. I mean, like what Deb said about that, there was that moment where we did have that, you know, we were sort of, I mean, I started out in you know, the early blogging. I've been around online since 1999 blogging, and it was really different then, because there was room to be vulnerable, because not everybody had showed up on your website yet, right? And so whereas Facebook has always been like the universal marketplace where there's this context collapse, and your grandma's there, and you know, your drinking buddies are there, and your church group's there, and the kids that you used to babysit for are there, and it's really hard to get vulnerable when you have that kind of scrutiny. Like, that's another thing to do, is to make sure that you have small specific communities for groups who really need to be vulnerable together. I think is key. And, you know, since that moment in 2008 that Deb was talking about, I would say I mean, for me, it was actually more around like 2003, 4, 5. There was a lot more automated activity online. So my blog became unusable because the comments were full of spam. And so like I couldn't find anything anymore. And my blog actually broke under the weight. And it's been the same thing on Twitter. Twitter got significantly worse when we started seeing tens of thousands of bots, you know, like, so, you know, really, this is another thing I like about private chat channels is like, those groups don't show up there. And so you're not going to get that scary public noise that's just out to, you know, like the constant roar of trying to terrify people.
Right.
So yeah, that's another thing is like, as actually finding the protected spaces that way for at least doing some of the intimate work, but then stepping back out also into the broadcast zone. It's not like we never go into the broadcast zone, but it's like, give yourself the time in the private online zone as well.
I like that. Yeah, I think that's the crux of it, is not being able to set the parameters for private versus public.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also the parameters for context too. I think this is actually a thing that Facebook has started to do better. And I think Google tried it with Google Circles early on, which I was like, this is great. Now I can just have my family's over here, and you know, like my Little Pony fans are over here, and my professional life is over here, right? Like they don't all have to be part of the same. You know, I don't always have to tip my hand that I'm a massive My Little Pony fan. So yeah, like, and so that's,
and
and
yet
that's
that makes me so happy.
I do what I can. Yeah.
By the way, I put this in the live stream chat, but it's called the 36 questions that lead to love.
Great.
And they're really, really good questions. And I recommend trying it. I did actually try this out on a date, and it was kind of a disaster. It did not lead to love at all. It did the opposite thing, but
oh dear. Well, maybe that's it. Is maybe you get vulnerable and you're like, I don't like what I'm seeing here at all. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I just realized like he had very, very extremely low attention span, so he couldn't like follow the questions. So I'm like, okay, this is not gonna work.
No.
But in any case, I think I would love to check in with you after I experiment some more, because I do want to try some of these. I want to read your book, and I want to try out some of these things and see what happens, and to see if I could just have more awareness about why I'm doing what I'm doing, and think more, pause more, not be kind of in this frantic pace that I'm in right now. I want to try this.
Cool. I would love to actually, I've been wanting to do this as a series of workshops. Like I've got a couple of exercises that I think would really be good to just like, and I want to get a really diverse group of people there. Because I think, I mean, one of the things that I think it sounds like you guys are working on as well is, you know, bringing people together across political and other kinds of divides. I live in New York City, and I think there's a lot of people out there who probably don't think about New York City this way, but what I love about New York City is like random bus and subway conversations with people. I meet more people from different places in New York than I think I would anywhere else. And it's one of the reasons I stay here. So I'd like to, you know, do workshops that foster more of that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's really great. Okay.
Well,
thank
I
you.
would very much like to thank Gus, you for being here and engaging in this conversation, and Annabelle, your perspective just kind of brings things to life sometimes, I think. And if anyone watching this actually does try any of these things and finds a way to create a little more space between themselves and their media, and try and create a little more space for real relationships on in their social media life, in addition to what else is going on, I think it would be really interesting to hear what your experiences are with that, and if anything works, don't keep that a secret. Share it. Yeah,
and keep in touch. Once again, the book is Keep Calm, Log On. Keep Calm, Log On. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, and I'd love to, you know, engage in more conversations there too. Yeah, let me know. Let me know how it works.
What's your Twitter handle?
Keep Calm, Log On.
Okay,
basically at
cool.
Keep Calm, Log On is one, and then should be able to find it on Facebook. The website for the overall website for the page is just keepcalmlogon.com. There's no and in it, just keepcalmlogon. So, yep.
Okay. Well,
Cool.
excellent.
Thank you so much
you.
for having me. This has been a great conversation.
Thanks, everyone. And
Yeah.
thanks, Rachel, for support in the background there, too.
Thanks, Rachel.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you so much. Bye.